Fantastic. We are now live. Okay. I'm just going to begin with a short presentation and then hand it over to our panelists. So let me start with. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Science and Policy Exchange's Public Forum. I am Saishri, one of the two co-presidents for SPE. We are very excited to have such a great group of panelists to speak at this event, and this forum is the second of our 3 forums that are funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research's Grant for Public Dissemination of Science. The goal of these public forums is to give students and members of the community a chance and a space to ask questions that are surrounding a particular topic, and also to gain different perspectives of the topic on hand. Dr. Jason Miller from the University of Ottawa was supposed to be joining us today, but due to an unforeseen circumstance, he will not be able to attend the event. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge the history of the lands on which we are each living. We would like to begin by acknowledging that Science and Policy Exchange is located in unceded Indigenous lands. The Kaniok'keharra Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Chichogye, commonly known as Montreal, is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. A little about SPE, if you don't know us, is that Science and Policy Exchange is a student-led nonprofit organization where we aim to foster the student voice and evidence-based decision-making and to bring together leading experts from academia, industry, and government to engage and inform students and the public on issues at the interface of science, society, and policy. For the last 10 years, we have been doing this by hosting a variety of events like our SPE cafes, which are informal discussions surrounding key policy issues, and our public forums like the one we are hosting today. We have also had training sessions on science advice and science diplomacy and consultations like our white paper on student perspective on STEM education in Canada and our Pan-Canadian survey on Canadian scholarships and fellowships. We publish reports after each of our events summarizing key takeaways and policy recommendations, all of which you can find on our website. While these posters are of events we have held in the past, our team has interesting events lined up for 2021. Next month, we will be hosting a panel discussion funded by CC UNESCO and embracing diverse postgraduate career paths. We will begin registration for this event shortly, so do keep an eye out on our social media platforms and our website for more information. A little housekeeping. I know all of us are used to Zoom webinars by now, but in case you are not, we are going to be using the Q&A box, which you will find at the bottom of your screen to facilitate questions to the panelists. We have also enabled the upvote feature, so if you find questions similar to yours that you would wish to ask, you can simply vote for that question. And questions with the most votes do appear higher on the list. We're also live streaming the event on our YouTube page, Science and Policy Exchange. And if you are attending the forum and live tweeting, don't forget to tag us and use the hashtag SPE Public Forum. Now to the event. Our moderator for this evening is Dr. Jean-Christophe Therese-Pepon, who is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University, where he conducts research at the interface of health policy and citizen engagement, as well as business practices. His professional experience, having worked for both the pharmaceutical industry and the government, provides him with an insider's understanding of the ethical, policy, and societal dimensions of health technology development and assessment. He carried out his CIHR-funded postdoctoral fellowship at Petrie Flom Center for Health Law Policy, Biotechnology, and Bioethics at Harvard Law School, and currently serves on the board of directors of the International Association of Bioethics. I'm going to hand over the virtual mic to you, JC. Like everyone else, I'm excited to see where our discussions lead us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Saishri. Hello, everybody. I'm very thrilled to be here today to moderate this great event. So today's forum topic is AI research development and implementation in the healthcare system or healthcare setting. So there's a lot of hype and a lot of hope surrounding AI in health, as it's expected to increase and transform the way we diagnose, prevent, and treat, as well as the way we interact with technology. This may disrupt the healthcare system, leading to enhanced efficiency by automating routine tasks and decreasing health-related costs, by broadening access to healthcare delivery, by targeting more precisely patient needs, and by assisting clinicians in their decision making. But for all these benefits to materialize and to serve the entire population, we need to find appropriate facilitator to help foster AI implementation while making sure that it is done in a responsible and effective way. As myself, a bioethicist, I can't stress enough the ethical and societal dimension of AI in health, and that failure to properly address them may create more harms than benefits. So today, our distinguished panelists will present you both their work and their perspective on AI development and implementation in the health sector more broadly. So be prepared for a fascinating forum. So let me briefly present you their accomplishment. First, we'll hear from Dr. Plinio Morita. So Plinio is an assistant professor at the School of Public Health and Health System at the University of Waterloo, and the J.W. Graham Information Technology Emerging Leader Chair in Applied Health Informatics. Dr. Morita is a leading researcher in the use of AI for public health and global health initiatives. And at the UB Lab, his research team focuses on the use of big data and AI to improve current public health surveillance mechanism and support countries in the monitoring of health indicators as well as environmental factors. Then we will hear from Azeda Dastmalchi, who is the CEO of Vital Tracer, a medical startup that designs smart wearable medical devices. So Vital Tracer has been awarded several regional and national awards under her leadership, including MyTax National Entrepreneur Award, CANI Regional Award on Innovation Product, Startup Canada Award, and AgeWell Emerging Entrepreneur Award. Apart from her work at Vital Tracer, Azeda is also a PhD candidate at University of Ottawa and a Canadian G20 Young Entrepreneur. Finally, we'll have Dr. Carole Jebe, who is the scientific director of the Fonds de Recherche du Québec en Santé. Over the course of her career, she held several positions as an executive and science advisor in the health research sector. From 2003 to 2009, she held leadership positions at Genome Québec, including the role of Vice President of Scientific Affairs. She was then named partner at Cap Cogito, a consulting firm. Since November 2018, she has been the Assistant Director of Research at the CHUM Research Center, after working as the Assistant Director of Operation. She is currently a member of the Board of Director of the Catalyst Initiative in Early Clinical Research, and a member of the College of Reviewer at CIHR. So before I begin, I would like to remind that each panelist has about 10 minutes to present, and then you will all have a Q&A period that I will be managing. Please send your question through the chat box. You can ask a question either in English or in French, and I will translate them to our panelists. So Plinio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just give me 1 second while I launch the presentation. Excellent. Can you get a confirmation, quick confirmation that the slides are up?
It's working.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So just to reiterate what was just described, I'm Plinio Morita. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Public Health and Health Systems at the University of Waterloo. I'm an engineer by training, but I've been working in healthcare for about 10 years now, 10, 12 years, on the use of mobile health technology to support we started with the design of apps for chronic diseases, and now we're looking at the use of Internet of Things and AI to improve public health surveillance. Right? So I know that the talk today wasn't necessarily supposed to be about the pandemic, but I think this talk here gives that flavor of the importance of these technologies, especially in critical times like we're living right now. So my research team focuses on the intersection of these two areas, right? So we're not really doing public health surveillance, we're building tools and building technologies that could be used to inform public health surveillance. And that is done through the use of IoT technologies and mobile health solutions. The data generated by these systems, that's where artificial intelligence comes in. That's where you use AI to identify useful patterns, to extract useful information from the large volumes of data that we have been accessing. So my research program is driven by extreme events that we have been seeing around the world recently, right? So extreme cold events here in Canada. We see like extreme heat events in Canada and other countries, like for example, like the case of heat waves around the world, and especially in urban areas. We have projects with UNICEF Mongolia, for example, on the monitoring of extreme air pollution by the use of IoT technologies in Mongolia. And more recently, we had wildfires in Canada that are also an important event that technologies could support with the detection and monitoring. But ultimately, right now, our reality is the pandemic. Right? We're all living through COVID-19 right now. And the question is, what can we do? What can we do with the data that our sensors are already generated, and how can we use that to improve public health surveillance? So throughout the conversation today, I'm going to talk about different applications of different types of wearables and IoT technologies that are being used in this space, that we have been using in this research space. I will tell you a little bit about what I mean by wearables. So this is a pretty straightforward and traditional definition. So anything that you wear on your body, so a fitness tracker, anything that is attached to your body. You can see a wide variety of different sensors, all the way to complex smartwatches that have much more processing power on them. And then I talk about the IoT, so that's Internet of Things. So those are all the devices that are connected to the internet around us. And this is an example. Ecobee is a company that we have been working with, that we have a specific research project on the use of their data for monitoring sleep patterns. And I'll talk to you about it in a minute. But ultimately, these are technologies that are already collecting data. You're using these systems at home. I have my wearables on me right now. That data is already being generated. But you know how much is used for public health research or for informing public health policies? Zero. Right now, there is very minimal use of this data for public health purposes, because again, data is often isolated inside silos, and it's very hard for public health officials to access this data. So that's where our article on the use of disruptive technologies for environmental and health research, where we talk about exactly about the use of artificial intelligence in public health, blockchain as well, and Internet of Things. So I thought that this article was very relevant and very timely based on the topic of this panel. I thought it was important to share with the group. I can share a link to this later, and you guys can. This is published on an open source journal, so you should all have access to it. So the interesting thing about the pandemic is that we are all concerned about the effects of the virus, right? Like the impact, the health impacts of the disease, but we're often forgetting about what we're calling here like the hidden effect. So like the impact on mental health, for example, right? Like the social isolation. Like if you think I'm a professor at the University of Waterloo. My wife is a student success officer at the university as well. And we deal with students struggling with mental health all the time because everybody's isolated at home. They are often staying by themselves on a small apartment, right? Like isolated, and that is taking its toll. But we're not looking into this. We're also not looking at the impact that working from home is having on individuals. If you have to take care of your kids, right, or even if you have a home environment that is not conducive of working from home, that can also be a problem. So we're exploring the use of IoT technologies for improving our understanding of the impact of the pandemic in these environments. One interesting data set also that I would recommend the group taking a look is what we call like social mobility data from Google. So Google recently released, Google and Apple, like throughout the pandemic, they released a very powerful data set that it's an aggregated data set, so there's no personal information there. All the information that we get access to is at the city level, right? But we get very, very powerful data around how effective the quarantine orders have been, right? So you can see that, for example, around March, when the pandemic began, we saw that massive dip in the use of, in this case, like driving and transit, right? So if you look at the yellow and the purple line, so purple is a transit data, so basically transit usage in Quebec, Montreal, for example, dropped significantly below 60–70%. And went up a little bit, but then when you look at walking and driving, they resumed their standard pattern. So people were really concerned about the pandemic at this time, and we saw very steep reduction in social mobility. But as the pandemic progressed, like the data started generating more interesting patterns, and we've been looking at this from a public health perspective. Like, how can we use this data to monitor the effectiveness of the quarantining orders? So looking at other applications and other companies that are also trying to explore the impact of COVID-19, recently Fitbit released a global study on sleep patterns. And this study was published by the company itself, right? Like, it's not a third party. It only has internal researchers going through the data and plotting variations in sleep, right? So this is, if you look at the date here, this is the week ending on 22nd of March. So it was at the beginning of the pandemic. And you can see like a very interesting scenario where people on between like 18 and 40, 49, 50, they were sleeping more, right? Because they were at home, they were not going to work, so they were having more hours of sleep. But then if you look at 65 plus, people started having like servers. All that we're missing right now is public-private partnerships to make good use of this information and help us better understand the impact of the pandemic. So this is another plot. So for example, if you look at different cities, so you have Paris, Milan, Madrid, Barcelona, London, and Zurich, and you have like starting at February 9th all the way to like March 29th. So this is the same idea. So you have like average minute sleep change. So we saw an overall increase in the number of hours slept, right? So that's a very interesting insight, because at the beginning of the pandemic, people were still not aware about the massive risks of the disease. So what we're looking at right now is what is the long-term impact of this on the health of our population. So in order for us to understand the impact, we started looking at other data sets that we could dig into. So for example, the partnership with Ecobee that I just mentioned is one example. We have access through their partnership to over 115,000 unique data sets, mainly in North America, so Canada and US, where all anonymized, so there is no personal information on it. We only have access to aggregate data, but we can monitor sleep patterns out of this data. And why did we use Ecobee? It's because it's a very prevalent IoT technology in the market. There are over 1.4 million thermostats in the market right now in the world, most of them in Canada and US. But in addition to that, provinces in Canada have distributed thermostats for free. So last year, 2018, distributed 50,000 free thermostats by the province of Ontario alone. So that gives us access to a massive data source that can be used to understand the impact of COVID-19. So this is one example of one household, for example, right? Like, there's no information about any individual information here, but we can see very interesting patterns. So if you look, for example, let's look at like the patterns that we see before the pandemic. So everything that's in yellow right now on the screen, you see a very standard pattern of work. So people are at home in the morning, they go to work, they come back later in the evening, and as time goes by, you hit the pandemic. So that's like March 16 there. And you have this clear transition from like a very standard pattern of activity in the house, showing that the person is not home and that you're working, to a very diffuse pattern where you can see that people are now working from home, right? So we use the same data, and we're publishing an article right now to evaluate the impact on sleep patterns as well, because we have developed the algorithms for this. So this is one of the articles that we published out of the study. If you're in point for very nice paper, very direct, and we talk about the use of anomaly detection for this specific data set that I just talked. But ultimately, one thing that everybody is curious about in the pandemic is contact tracing, right? And this is something that we're all hearing about. The COVID Alert app was released by a couple months ago. Very powerful app. We were involved in the privacy evaluation of the application. Very safe. I have it on my phone. I was a beta tester, so I've been using it from the beginning. And I can vouch for it. Like I can tell you, it's safe. Feel free to use it because it's not violating any privacy of yours. But the problem with these applications is that in order to design something that was ready for the market and that did not violate people's privacy, we went overboard. Like the app right now is very simplistic, and consequently, people are not understanding why they have to use it. There is a lack of proper communication to inform the public why it's important to download something like COVID Alert. And similarly, like we've been involved in the development of another app called COVID Watch since March, where we're providing them guidance with the Canadian environment. But unfortunately, like as we were trying to bring COVID Watch into Canada, unfortunately, the government decided to go with the Canadian-built solution, that's COVID Alert. But we tried, like most of the development and most of the knowledge that was built by COVID Watch was used in the Canadian application as well. So this is the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have at the discussion at the end. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me at the email that I have posted there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Plinio. Now, Azela, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for this time. So I'm gonna start. All of us has experienced rising in our blood pressure. For example, when we have a job interview, or me right now giving this pitch. These rises are normal, but in some people it becomes serious and need to be addressed. Hi everyone, I'm Azadeh, CEO of the Viral Tracer, and today I'm presenting you Viral Tracer, a medical smartwatch which is measuring all human vital signs through their wrist using optical sensor and AI technology. 1.56 billion of people globally suffer from high blood pressure. This includes 80% of elderly, and it's still first reason of death. Canada alone spending $250 billion annually to treating this chronic disease. And the current device available in the market is only cuff-based, which goes around the arm, inflate and deflate to measure blood pressure. It's bulky, inconvenient, and not possible to continuous monitoring. However, different studies show that it's possible to prevent it by diagnosing it at the early stage. It's only possible by continuous monitoring blood pressure. That's why the solution for this problem is Viral Tracer, a medical smartwatch which is measuring all your vital signs through your wrist using optical sensor and AI technology. So it's like basically other wearable like Apple and Fitbit, but it's more accurate in terms of being a medical device, also able to measure blood pressure as well. So it's not only limited to the blood pressure, we can call it all-in-one device. It's measuring oxygen level, respiratory rate, skin temperature, heart rate variability, and even more. That's why it's gonna be a perfect solution for remote health monitoring, especially during COVID-19 pandemic and for senior home and seniors who need to monitor all their vital signs at the same time. It can alert in case of abnormality to the healthcare provider and or caregiver. So how it's work? It's using optical sensor to measure different signals, transfer it to the mobile by Bluetooth, and then from the mobile goes to the online cloud. We have an extensive team of experts, including myself. So basically, I can confess that this was my master and PhD thesis for 10 years R&D behind it. And then we come up with that has a huge market. So let's do a startup and build it for the industry. And that's why I have a very good background in the biosignals and AI, but my co-founder Zara also has a PhD in AI technology. And our CTO, Ali, has a 5 national and international patent for different medical devices. And Abuzar is our IoT who has a master at Johns Hopkins University from computer science. We also definitely have a different advisory, including the incubator and accelerator co-business coach, professors from different universities, cardiologists, and also pediatricians. We are not only selling our hardware as a technology, but our main value is data that we can gather in an online platform. That's why we will have a SaaS model in terms of revenue. And of course, since that our secret sauces are more AI softwares, we can customize our technology and license it to the other bigger company. Our current target market are researchers because our technology right now is the MVP and not, we don't have the Health Canada and FDA approval yet. So we don't sell our technology as a medical device, but it's like an open source, kind of open source in terms of hardware and software for the researchers so they can use for their own medical applications and for their own pilot studies like sleep apnea, dementia, and more. So they're gonna, at the end, publish a paper and we will receive a credibility. So it's a very good niche market to start and evaluate our beta prototype and MVP as well. But our main target market are using this technology in hospital for post-surgery monitoring, who needs the patients after ICU needs the continuous monitoring. And there is no technology available out there. And the main point is for senior homes, specifically for seniors to monitor all the vital signs at the same time. We have a 2 provincial patent regarding our blood pressure algorithm and SpO2. And definitely we are among lots of competitors. If you want to compare the accuracy of our blood pressure with the other devices available in the market like Omron and iHealth, of course, they already certified and they are already in a market, but they are having only cuff base. So it's not possible to using as a continuous monitoring. And it's also only measuring blood pressure and heart rate, but we are all in one. In terms of other wearable technology available in market, we can more call them gadget, like Apple and Fitbit. They don't have a medical certification and they don't call themselves as a medical device. So the accuracy of the result is not guaranteed. However, that we could also additional localize our cloud for the hospitals and senior homes. So all the confidential information is gonna keep there, but others like Apple and Fitbit could not do that. We are among other startups like Biobeat and Actia to do it, but they are not available in the market as well. What we have done so far when we established our company, we took several years to build the MVP. So we started to build the prototype, but it took a very long time. And then we start doing FDA and Health Canada, but before that, we find that there are lots of requirements to do it. And also the main problem with the startups, especially medical startup, is money because it's very expensive and time consuming. So we went through the different accelerator and incubator, including CDL, Creative Destruction Lab, District 3 in Concordia, McGill X1, Startup Garage from University of Ottawa, and more. And we finished our provincial patent, and right now we are opening our round, doing manufacturing and FDA clearance to do our clinical trial, and of course, scale up. So I'm gonna skip the financial part, but we have a different technologies, including the patch that we are working on it. And with the viral tracer, your health's gonna be in your hand, or better yet, on your wrist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carol, now it's your turn.
Okay, it's going to be better. Do you see the presentation okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So I'm coming from a different side, obviously, but I think that we can join any effort around the thematic that was proposed today, which is AI in the healthcare system and in the healthcare trajectory. So let me start with some things that, if it's going to work. Okay. Some things that I do not have to reinforce this. I think it was very clear with the previous panelists that AI and digital health, it's not a dream, it's now, and it's already embedded in the fact we provide healthcare, in fact that we provide the different support to the different patients. So I think that it becomes very obvious. And again, I'm coming from a funding agency point of view. So my job in the life is how can we support research, innovation, to be sure that projects that we see before will be able to find a place over the market and the commercialization will be okay in the right condition. Regarding AI by itself, we have a lot of examples, and sorry for the mix English-French, you will see all along the slide, but I'm pretty sure that you will we will go to the same at the same point at the end of the day. So regarding AI, we had a lot of investment in Montreal, but also in Quebec and also across Canada, a lot of initiatives. But if you look a little bit deeper into this different initiative, you will see that there is not so much AI and health. So how can we convey, how can we reassemble these two disciplines which need to be brought together? So it was a question. We make a very quick analysis in Quebec. So why don't we have so many solutions based on AI in the healthcare system? It's not because people don't want to adopt that. Healthcare givers don't want to use this technology. Obviously, as I said, we already have some in use. So what are the challenges? So a first challenge that we observed was about the expertise. So we have very good AI people, we have very good people in the healthcare system, caregivers, researchers, but it's not very easy to have people being able to speak the both languages. And it's not about French and English, it's about how can we spoke about data science, data manipulation, data use, and how can we speak also about healthcare, and all this type of things. So we thought that we had a need here to cross a different expertise. I'm going to skip some of them. There is one that is absolutely key. At least in Quebec, but it's also true in Canada, and it's also true in some other jurisdictions. It's very difficult to access our own data. So we develop some AI solution based on data of population outside from our province, outside of our country. It doesn't matter to develop the solution. It matters if or when we introduce a bias regarding the population we use. And it's a big challenge that we have. And finally, and as usual, we need to be more coordinated to be sure that we will deliver not only research, but also innovation that will find a place. We have some tool at the level of my funding agency to be able to support or to cross these difficulties. And it's about funding. We were very lucky to raise new funds from the government of Quebec, $16 million that we are able to invest over 3 years to do two main things, not many things, two main things: build capacity, so really support young researchers, young students in this career and in this development of this expertise, and build capacity in the data integration and analysis center that we need to have. So some HQP that we will find here. We really need this expertise. In the other case, we will not get the solutions that we need to have. Let me talk a little bit about AI health from another side. So definitely there is an acceleration of the transformation of health. It's needed. It's not something that we should ignore and that we can ignore. We need it to be able to sustain the healthcare system and the different needs that we have. And it's about AI, but it's about a lot of other technologies. I'm not going to talk about genomics, but I could. I'm not going to talk about precise medicine, but I could. And all of them are just put all together to provide the best solutions that we will have. There is one common point here. Indeed, not one common point, but two common points. First, the patients. So all of them has to be developed around the patients and the citizens. What are the needs? What do we want to do? How do we include them into the development process? The other one is about data. And data are needed in any solutions that you want to see. We talk a lot about prevention, promotion, detection, diagnosis, but do not forget about the different organizations that are really offer the healthcare solutions that we need. So we also talk about logistic optimization and all these type of things where data are needed and should be analyzed if we want to improve our healthcare system. It's going on already in the different departments. It's not something that is new. A lot of organizations are taking care of this. Healthcare organization and any hospitals across Quebec province, but also across Canada and in some other jurisdictions already have their data solution opportunities. It's also true across universities, which is really good because we can bring together the different expertise we have, and also at the governmental level. So do not think that government is not aware of the improvement we need to have in terms of data access and AI development. They are aware and they have some politics regarding this, some strategies to support this. Regarding access to data, and I think it is most probably the most important slides that I have in this presentation, it's not about giving access. It's about finding the right equilibrium between the access that we have, the benefits to patients and populations, and the fact that we have to deal and to use this data in a safety manner. And it's really about an equilibrium. So a right protection for the personal information, at the same time, the right permission to use this information. And I'm not going to describe the others, but maybe the second one, to restrict the access because we need to build some security, or to build the right control to use it in the safer manner that we can. And it's really about this equilibrium, and this is something that we are considering in Quebec. Lot of challenges, lot of issues that we should continue to face, But maybe an important one that is now not anymore in the bruit fond. Everybody is aware that we need to tackle this one. Most of the time we say it's about acceptability, the acceptance coming from the patients and from the citizens. It's not the terms that I wrote here. I'm talking about adoption. I think that it's more than acceptance. It's really about involvement. How do we create a dialogue between citizens, patients, researchers, companies, and political and governments to be sure that we find the right equilibrium and the right area to deal with this? Lot of words. So it's not the property, the property, the ownership of one group. It's the property and the ownership of the different groups: anthropologues, philosophers, biologists, developers, innovators, governments. We need all of this to be able that each word on this slide will be explained, debate, if we really want to achieve the adoption I was talking about. We have some tools at the level, at least of the Quebec province. So I think that everybody is aware about La Déclaration de Montréal. So how to we can develop a responsible AI, how we can use AI in a responsible way. We also have l'Observatoire sur les impacts de l'intelligence artificielle et du numérique, OBVIA. So this observatory is really key to inform any key opinion leader, any researchers, any public or strat of the public regarding AI and digital tools, and how we can better work with them. It is supported by the FRQ. And just to give an example and to make a link with the previous panelist, OBVIA published several papers, not one papers, but several papers on the mobile applications that could be used to trace the spread of the pandemic during this the wave 1 of COVID. Without the success that I wanted to see, I was one of the persons that would like to promote more use of AI in these traceability tools. I hope it's going to be even better than the applications that we can access right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the three of you. Fascinating perspective, and I think it was interesting to see the continuum from research to development to funding and science policy making. So we have about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. I will take a question from the chat. The Q&A and from social media in the approximate order that I've noted them. But I will take the moderator privilege to ask the first question, which dovetail one of the questions that I've received so far. And it's addressed to the three of you. If you had a magic wand and that you could change one thing in the research or health ecosystem in order to improve AI development, but also that it will be reaching end users, patients, etc., in order to improve health population. What would it be? What would you like to change? Only one thing.
I can start with a quick answer. I would go back to Carol's comment about exactly about like data access. I think that's the biggest barrier that we see right now for AI. AI requires large data sets, right? We're not talking about 100 people, 100 data sets. We're talking about thousands, like tens of thousands. And that is the biggest challenge that we face right now. You have on one end, you have hospitals that rightfully are keeping their data tied to their chest and not willing to share because that's private information from people, right? Like you don't want to make that available to the public. And then on the other hand, you have researchers that have access to immense computing power, are working with Google and big companies, but don't have access to that data. So I think what Quebec is doing right now is exactly what we're looking for, like creating that ecosystem that connects the two and that allows data to be shared according to specific parameters, according to ensuring that privacy is maintained, and then connecting with researchers that have the knowledge and the capacity to use this data.
Carole?
Of course, I agree, and I suspect that I cannot have the same choice. So let me try another angle, because I fully agree, definitely, and it's really the main thing that we need to change, and we need to cross data. So it's not about data coming from the healthcare system, but it's also data coming from anywhere else. So environment, education, etc., etc. If we really want to have the right tools, but let me try another angle. I would say involvement of citizens, and not only patients, but really involvement of citizens since the beginning of the idea. So when we have the idea, when we start to design the solution, have them on board. I think it's really important, not only to be sure that it's accepted, etc., but because you have what they have in mind when they will use it. Health is not going to be anymore the fact of hospital and healthcare organization. Of course, it's going to be, okay, we will still need to have some surgery and things like this, but it's going to be moved more at home. And here we really need to fulfill the needs of the citizens, and not the patients only.
And currently, the COVID crisis is is a great example of the fact that we are pushing more and more people at home, and we need to monitor them and try to be able to respond to their need where they are, and not to jam the emergency rooms. Yeah, really interesting. Adede, do you want to add something?
I totally agree with both of them, but if I want to add the third point, I could say that I wish the duration of reviewing the ethical board, Health Canada could be shorter or some more simpler to even the companies like us who want to create the data. It seems kind of really hard, very near to impossible to get the data from hospitals or anywhere else.
Yeah, very interesting. We have one question from the Q&A that is for Plinio. Do you have any recommendation for regulating generated data, data that is mostly used for corporate interest, like targeted advertising? What can it be done to increase public trust in these devices?
That is a very, very interesting question. And the reality is that nobody's thinking about this when very few people are thinking about this when they're using their Facebook apps, their Instagrams, their Twitters, right? Like, people are not concerned about who's accessing that information, that the fact that Facebook is using that information to give them tailored recommendations and tailored ads, right? But they are concerned about public health officials accessing data from their wearables, right? So the problem is I think, in my opinion, is public education, right? Like, people need to know that the data is already there, right? It has been collected. It has been used for corporate purposes, right? There's no way around it. Like, Fitbit has access to your data. Apple has access to your data. There's no way, like, unless you're not using those technologies, they're still going to have access to it, and they're still going to use it for their corporate purposes. So people need to start detaching other uses for social good, like, for example, for public health applications, from this perception that there is an evil behind that data. Because, again, the evil that people already are always concerned about already happened, right? The corporations already used your information. So, like, for example, if you look at the Google and the Facebook data, right? Like, the Google data that I shared with you, for example, on the slide, that is just a slice of what Google has about you, right? And they're willing to share that with the community so that we can use that for research purposes. But again, when it comes to using it for public health applications, we're often looking at data at an aggregate level. We're not exploring at one individual. We're looking at the population health, right? So I think as I said, like, it's a matter of education. Like, people need to be aware that the corporate use ends and the social good or the public health use begins, right? And that's where we're working. That's the area that we're working in. And then we have like organizations, like federal organizations that are guiding this process, right? This is not something that can be done just by Plinius going out and saying, hey, like I want to access your Fitbit data. No, we need public trust. We need organizations. We need agencies like Public Health Agency of Canada or local public health agencies like getting involved in this process as well to, as you said, like go increase the trust levels of transaction.
Yeah.
I mean, totally agree, but maybe I would add with another perspective, which is complementary, so it's not in contradiction. So yes, we need to educate, and we need to have people better understand what's going on with their data when they use Facebook and so on and so forth. At the same time, I think it's the responsibility is not only on the shoulders of each citizen. Okay, so it's not about, hey, please better understand what you're doing, and don't be surprised. I think if we want to promote the fact that using health data is for the social good, we also need to have a bigger transparency on what we're doing with data, what are the results of the use of this data, and really have a type of agreement with our citizens saying that, okay, so you allow me to use your data, and here is what I'm going to give you back. And I'm not sure that as public deciders, we really do this. We don't do it enough, I think.
It is very, very interesting to hear you on my presentations, but that's one of the research streams in my research lab right now. We're using blockchain exactly for that purpose, right? To create an ecosystem where not only you between the people that have the data, so the users of the wearables and the researchers, but you also increase transparency where any user can go out and say, hey, who's using my data? Who has access to my information? And I think it goes back to what you just mentioned, that it's this transparency. It's allowing people to know what has been done with their data.
And I'm curious, Azadeh, in your development, are you facing those challenges? Are you? Yeah. Can you contextualize it in your own work?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We have a lot of these problems. That at the same time, we have a problem to find the volunteers, official volunteers from hospitals. I mean, patient in the hospitals to use our technology. But on the other hand, we sign official contract that we cannot own the data, even if we make them anonymously. In Quebec, that even we remove the name of the persons and personal informations, still we don't allow to have the data or own the data. And this is something that is really concerned me, because me as a citizen, I don't mind to give all kind of my health information to any research on society. But the other issues that all these medical information, they are not synchronized to each other. It's like my one information from one hospital A to the private clinic B, and to the CLSC C, it's not connected. So whenever it's still based on a paperwork as well. So we need to have a maybe government online platform to have all the data of the citizen online and synchronized to make it possible to access. Even myself, I'm not eligible to access my own personal medical imaging, for example. Yeah, if I have an MRI, it's very hard to get my MRI knee pictures.
Yeah. So I think there's a consensus that access to data and data sharing is a major issue, and It's not surprising as AI is feeding on big data for sure. Plinio, do you want to?
Definitely. I was just going to say that like that's definitely the challenge right now. Technology is like it's not the issue anymore, right? Like if you look at the history of artificial intelligence, right? Like we have three like big names in the AI world that in like 2 decades ago, like probably like 15 to 20 years, started developing concepts of AI and the artificial neuron, right? And the reason why AI research didn't develop was because there was no computational power to deliver on what they were proposing. And now we're not living in that world anymore.
I don't have your voice. Is it only me?
Voice. Sorry, is it better now?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sorry. So ultimately, your insights are just as good as your data, right? So you need to have access to good, clean, reliable information to train your models. So that's why you need the clinical organizations associated with the researchers and with innovators in the private space to work together and use data for social good.
Another question I have for you, and probably it's related to your presentation of the day, and Carol also you alluded to that. But how long does it take from having a great idea, something that you want to develop? How many years does it take until it can finally reach patients?
From a medical hardware technology to get the access to the clinical trial who get the access, it takes something between 3 to 5 years because even finishing the R&D in medical area is very time consuming and expensive, and it costs something around $3 to $5 million.
That is a very accurate description. Like I've been involved with the evaluation of medical devices for the past like about 10 years as well, and that's exactly the price range and the time that it takes for even for large corporations to go through the process. Like it's not cheap, it's not fast. It's just very cumbersome process.
But I want to confess something that being in a Quebec and the ecosystem for the Quebec is the best city around the world to build your hardware technology. The government is super supportive, and there is lots of free grant, non-dilutive money to help the startups to start from scratch.
Carol, that's a really nice pat in your back.
That's a nice pat. I'm very pleased, and I think that and thank you for saying this, because and I think it's about the government and the different agencies, and we are able to work all together. So there is really a continuum when you try to develop something. At the same time, I felt that my two colleagues were maybe, at least in Quebec, a little bit optimistic, because I think that if you count between the idea and the final product, yes, it can be 4 to 5 years. I think there is another difficulty, which is how you integrate this technology really in the healthcare system. And it's another pain. I think that we are lucky enough to have l'innovateur en chef, le dirigeant de l'innovation, so all these guys that are aware. So I think it becomes easier and easier to have some links, even in the different healthcare organization, but it's still difficult to really get an adoption of the different medical device.
I totally agree with you that specifically in a hospital, it's very hard to sell product and convince medical healthcare, public healthcare to buy it. but it's more easily for selling these medical devices and technology for long-term monitoring and telemedicines and senior home. They are less restricted. And thanks to COVID, now people more trust on a wearable technology and they want to have it more. That's a good side of COVID for us.
And I will launch an RFA pretty soon, just finding this type of solution for the long-term healthcare system. So it's you're true, but so yes, there is a distinction here that we need to do.
And that is why we see so many innovators, unfortunately, building their technologies in Canada and going to the US to sell them, right? Because it's much easier for them to sell their wearable or whatever technology they're building to a small hospital network with 3 hospitals in Ohio than it is for them to sell to the entire province of Quebec or the entire province of Ontario, right? So that's one of the disadvantages of the nature of our system here. Like I agree with Jebe that we have good investments in Canada. Like Canada is a good place to be an innovator. But that last transition, like getting into the market and selling it, like unless you're selling as a consumer product, it's a big challenge. Like if you're selling to hospitals, it's a big barrier.
Interesting. And we just received a question from YouTube. That is, I think, a good segue to this talk. That is really optimistic for now, but the question is more, I think, more pessimistic a little bit. So the question is, you're talking about AI in and healthcare systems, but it seems like AI was not successful in the field in the context of COVID-19 pandemic control. So what are you expecting from AI, and what can we learn from the COVID pandemic and the issue about having great AI technology that can really have an impact on population?
I can speak a little bit about that. So like the reason why AI was not successful in controlling the pandemic comes from two main reasons. One is that we don't know the disease enough, right? Like AI is only as good as the data that you're using to train it, right? So you need to know that these are the symptoms and these are the people that were infected, and this is what you have to look on the data for your AI algorithms to go there and replicate that. And we don't have that data. We were starting to have that type of information right now, right? So up until now, we're just guessing, right? So that's one of the reasons. The second one goes back to data access again. Countries that were implementing contact tracing apps, like for example, South Korea, and they were using artificial intelligence on the data to identify clusters, they were very successful. So it goes back to data, right? Like you can only be as good as the data that you have.
Yeah, I will add a third point, if I may. These 2 points are true, but I will go back to the acceptance and adoption and this type of things. It was really, really difficult to convince the decision maker in public health and at the governmental level to really support and adopt AI solution for COVID. A lot of questions, and I'm not saying that it's good or not. I think it's good to ask questions. This is what we have to do. But it was like we don't have the time to debate right now when we are in the middle of the pandemic. So this is why we should not delay again this debate, which is really a societal debate that we should have. Because it's going to be a third wave, a fourth wave, and we will be at the same point, because it does not have only to see with technology and data, it has also to see with the fact that, do we trust this? Do we understand that it's working? So do we want to have this type of solution? And we as a society. So
what is not right in the hypothesis behind that question is, it's not the technology itself that failed to be able to meaningfully provide benefits. It's the implementation, it's the data, Plinio, it's the social acceptability, Carol, and as well the translation between great evidence-based research and to convey them and convince a policymaker to take hard decision, but that will have important impact and significant impact on their constituent.
And one more thing about the COVID specifically virus, that it has a very different and wide symptom on different peoples. So to train the AI algorithm, you need to have all those data, but it's also, we are still hearing that we might have the second generation of COVID or any new generation of COVID with the different symptoms, or some people is not having a fever or cough, but they might have an irritation on skin or joint pain. So these are like, we have to use unbiased data and a different population with different range of like ethnicities and different colors to able to train an unbiased and fairness of AI algorithm.
That's an amazing point, because it's a perfect segue for the next question, which is data is really important, but it's not per se the reality. And data can have embedded biases. So how can we make sure that we have access to clean, cleanse, to good data? The quality of data, it's another problem on top of data access as well. So how are you facing those biases and accessing good data?
I can talk about our technology to be more, so in that case, there is no chance, in my opinion, except to do a different control pilot study and clinical trial to make sure that you include all the parameters that you want, including like different genders, different race, different skin colors, different populations. And these are all the parameters that definitely affect to vital signs. But the same things for pandemic and COVID would be the same. And it's very hard and kind of, I can say, to be honest with you, impossible to have all those population to make it unbiased. In any case, it would be kind of biased, but hopefully gonna apply with the most of the situation.
Just the simple fact that you are training data, right? Like, so for example, let's think about as it is research, right? Like where you are comparing data from your wearable to data that's on electronic health records, right? The simple fact that you're using data from electronic health records presents a bias, because you're talking about people that have been in the hospital, right? People that have been through the emergency room or through intensive care or whatever. It's not a perfect representation of the population. So the answer to the question that the audience posed, there is no way, like there's no way to be perfectly unbiased. You just need to acknowledge your bias and try your best to remove it as you keep augmenting your data sets, right? Like we try, like if you're developing something that is meant to work for a certain population, you need to make sure that you have data from that population when you were creating your artificial intelligence algorithm.
Carol, do you want to add something?
Maybe interesting, because as I'm not a specialist, I can listen to this and say, oh, wow, it's interesting. I'm coming from the world of genomic. Okay, so it was mentioned, and that's really interesting to see that 20 years after, we have the same questions that we had 20 years ago with genomics. Okay, we found some single polymorphism, and how can we be sure that it's true for any population? Blah blah blah. So, and this is why I make this link. The way we answer the questions in the genomic field was with validation assessment, and be sure that we confront some genomic panels that we find in some other cohorts, in some other population. And so most probably, and it's all about how we do a right development. It's most probably something that will going to happen. So having a tool train on a subpopulation and apply this tool on another population, and we will see how to improve. It will be my answer.
Great, thank you very much. So we are near the end of our forum, but I have maybe one last question for you. Since an important subset of our audience are students and trainees, I would like to have each of you provide one advice to them to venture in the fascinating world of AI in a healthcare setting. So maybe Plinio, it could be in research, as it is in development, and Carol, policy making, research funding, etc., etc. So I don't know which one of you want to start.
I can start say that don't go on a medical hardware technology. But it's very challenging. If you want to go for AI platform, SaaS model, mobile app, don't go on a hardware. It's very, very challenging. It's not worth it.
My suggestion from an educational perspective, make good use of the resources that are out there. There's a lot of free content online from good research groups or good instructors around the world, teaching people like the basics of AI, because AI, like we talk about AI and everybody wants to work in AI, right? But it's something that, like, if in order for you to be an expert in artificial intelligence, you're going to have to do a degree in computer science, a master's, a PhD, or in engineering, right, or something related. But that doesn't prevent you from knowing how to use AI as a tool. AI, like from a generic point of view, it's like a statistical tool. Like there are guidelines online that you can use and learn that and apply that in your career as you go along. So that's my suggestion.
Great, thank you. And Carol?
I don't know. It's really, really difficult. I would say keep an open mind. Really keep an open mind, because it's not only about computer science or medical science. It's also about, as I said, anthropology, philosophy. It's a change. It's a big game changer in our society. So, and so the double competency I was talking about, it's not a double competency, it's a multiple competency. And it's not only true for AI, but for any students right now. I mean, you're building the future of our society, and we need to have people with really translational skills. So keep your mind open.
One more thing as a serious answer that I want to add, if anyone wants to start doing any AI startup, the Quebec and Montreal is still the best. We have the big leaders in Montreal, like Benjio, and we have a perfect accelerator and incubator located in Montreal that they are super supportive. And also government free money that you can start from scratch. I definitely and highly recommend you to start with one of those university incubator like a D3, X1 McGill, or an XAI from HEC, that they are specified on AI, and they teach you, train you how to establish the real business, and at the same time how to apply the AI with the valid market.
Great. I cannot thank you enough for your amazing perspective and how generous you were. So I will now pass the mic to Saishri for the afterword by Science and Policy Exchange.
Thank you so much, JC, and thank you everyone, to all the panelists, for your incredible insights on this topic. Like it was said earlier, like AI and these other technologies are already integral, and part of our lives. But what that actually means for healthcare and health research has always been elusive. But thanks to your amazing points and also to the fantastic questions that came from the audience, we hope that with this panel and that today, certain barriers to this topic have been broken, and that we can keep engaging in this conversation further on. I also want to thank JC for fantastically moderating the entire panel, but also a big shout out to him for also helping SPE behind the scenes with organizing this forum too. So thank you guys so much. Before we leave, just a quick PSA again from SPE's side is that if you guys want to reach out to us or be part of our next event, or want to be part of SPE, don't forget to contact us via our social media platforms and our email. And do visit our website to know about the events that we will be having in the future. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the event today.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you very
Stay
much.
safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.